In this interview recorded on January 27, 2022, former Ludlow resident Carolyn Milter discussed her upbringing, tenure working at the Cleveland Press, raising her children in a Ludlow neighborhood, and her engagement with straw buying, which refers to white residents purchasing homes with the intention to sell them to a black family.
Okay, now, are you ready? You want me to say something just in general about my background, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, I was born in Charleston, West Virginia, grew up in a small town in West Virginia, and in terms of what we're thinking about here in relation to Ludlow, that small town, everybody was white, and there were no Catholics, there were no Jews, there were no people of color, there were no immigrants. It was very much a white Protestant environment. However, my family was educated, and for example, my mother had gone actually to a Catholic nursing school in Michigan. So we had, within my family, there was not bigotry, and I would also like to say about West Virginia, even today, where it gets so much attention as being, being a place of white supremacy and being difficult about civil rights. There's truth there, but there are also some good people too. And I had several school teachers history teachers who talked about the Civil War and about race in ways that were dealing with the historical reality, which was worthwhile. And I wanted to be a journalist, so I went to Ohio University because it did have a very good journalism school. And I met my husband, Milter, in college, and he grew up here in Cleveland, primarily in Cleveland Heights. And when we got married, we rented an apartment in East Cleveland. And this was during the period when the real estate industry was doing incredible blockbusting in East Cleveland. There was a year in that period when in the spring, this elementary school in East Cleveland was virtually, the kids were all white, and over the summer, blockbusting cleaned out that particular neighborhood, and when the school opened in the fall, almost all the kids were black. And we had liked East Cleveland. We were living near the Forest Hill Park, and so we had actually looked at houses in East Cleveland. But when all this blockbusting started, obviously, it made us very nervous. And I had said, and my husband agreed, we then had our first child in 1964. And I said, I want her to grow up in a place where there are different kinds of people, different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions, and it looks like East Cleveland is not going to be the place. And we went to a meeting at Kirk Junior High School in East Cleveland one night. It was called as a neighborhood meeting to discuss the housing situation. And there were tons of people there, white people, who were angry, irate, upset, and the whole issue was they wanted to keep blacks from moving into East Cleveland. They did not want East Cleveland to become all black, which it pretty much is today, thanks to the real estate industry. Well, that kind of finished us with East Cleveland. And I had left the newspaper and gone to work for a nonprofit, a little nonprofit, which has since gone out of business, and called the Council on Human Relations. And somehow someone there had passed a Ludlow newsletter on to me. I wish I had that newsletter. Unfortunately, I don't. But I do remember what in it connected me to Ludlow. Joanne Finley, who was at that point, I believe, in medical school, living in Ludlow with her lawyer husband and her children, and very much involved in the creation of what became Ludlow Community Association and its housing program. And in that newsletter, I remember she said she was writing it late at night, sitting at her kitchen table. And she wrote about what the vision was for Ludlow. And it made an incredible impression on me. I showed it to my husband, and I said, let's look for houses there. And so we contacted the Ludlow Housing Program, which had started by then, of course. And we bought our house in 1964. And, as you know, the Ludlow Community Association had been founded in 1957, so, it was already active in the neighborhood when we moved in. And there had been blockbusting in Ludlow by the real estate industry, but we didn't use a realtor. We used the Ludlow housing program, the volunteers, and saw the house on Keswick Road that we bought in 1964. And the experience of seeing what happened in East Cleveland, and incidentally, East Cleveland had at one point a national reputation as a city manager-run city, very well maintained, very well managed. If the white people had not left en masse with a lot of help and a lot of pushing by the real estate industry, East Cleveland could have been what Ludlow became. That is, it could have been a place where there was stability and both white and black people could be living, but unfortunately it didn't work out for East Cleveland. And anyway, we were very happy to find Ludlow, and then started our Ludlow adventure.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm trying to. You did answer 3 of the questions I already had, but that's still pretty cool. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. I read an article you wrote in the Plain Dealer in April 1977 about what it was like to have white children in a majority black school. Do you mind to elaborate more on your children's experience?
Well, when I wrote that, you're welcome to, when you're thinking about, if you're using any, think about me in the interview or anything, when I wrote that, those feelings that were in that piece were about the best description I could give you of what our experience was. And of course, this was the experience of a white family, not a black family. But I think that it would be hard for me to go into a lot about the children's experiences, because when you're an adult and a parent, and you're seeing your children and their friends, you're viewing them from an adult perspective, and I'm not sure that you always totally understand what's going on from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, because I was thinking of doing this interview with you, I do think of one little incident that I think it says something. It happened to my two daughters, but the point is, I think it could have happened to any of the kids that were growing up together during that period, black or white. They experienced life together. They were together in school. They were together in the neighborhood. Their parents knew each other, and it was for our society, a very special experience. So here's the little incident that I will tell you that is, I don't think it's in that article. Maybe it is. I don't remember. But I think it says a great deal. There were a couple of boys who were brothers. One of them was in one of my daughter's classes. One of these brothers was very tall and thin for his age. This is elementary school, so we're talking about, fourth graders, sixth graders. The other brother was short and chubby, and it was just sort of funny because they were brothers, but they looked so different. And I was in the kitchen doing something, and my two daughters were sitting at the breakfast room table, and they, for some reason, one of them brought up one of the brothers and started talking about him. And she launched into all kinds of negative adjectives. Oh, he's nasty, he yells at people, I don't like to see him on the playground, he's this, he's that. She went through a whole list of negative things. None of them having to do with race, but negative comments. Her sister, when she had gone through the list, said, well, what about, and she named, I'm not going to use their names because, the families might still be able to figure out who I'm talking about. She mentioned the brother. She said, what about him, And the one who had said all the negative things about the other one said, oh, he's great. Oh, he's smart. He's in my class. I really like him. He's this, he's that. And she did a whole string of positive adjectives. And they weren't paying attention to me. As I said, I was doing something in the kitchen. It was almost like I was hearing them talk without them thinking about that I was listening to what they were saying. And I thought, how wonderful is this? And I think that there's quite a bit of this from our Ludlow children. And what was it? Is seeing somebody as an individual, not seeing them just about their race, not seeing them as a racial stereotype of some sort, but seeing them as who they are, as an individual human being. What a wonderful thing. And we know that in our society now, we have a lot of problems that could, I think, to some extent be solved if we had more of that. Now, of course, it wasn't always like that. I know, and you'll probably get this if you're doing interviews with different people, that when they become teenagers, when they became teenagers even then, and it's true today, they'll draw apart, and so you might have gone into the high school cafeteria, and you would have the black kids sitting together at a table, and then you would have the white kids at a different table, and the Ludlow white and black kids during this period might do separating, although some of them were mature enough, strong enough, whatever, to continue their friendships unbroken. But with teenagers, it does get a lot more complicated. But at the end of the day, at the end of the line, when they're in adulthood, what I have heard and what I've friends who went through all of this Ludlow period had the same experience, that the children of that era, of that civil rights era in Ludlow, both the black children and the white children, Ludlow was a very positive thing and had a positive effect on the way they see the world as adults.
Okay, I look forward to talking to people to see. I talked to one person so far, but other people I imagine will have similar stories. I was kind of curious. How did you meet the Stokes? Because I know Shelley, well now Shelley Stokes-Hammond's babysat your children.
Well, yes, that she babysat when I had the first child, and she was very small, and maybe when the second one was just been born, but I think mainly by the time Shelley was off and gone, out of high school and gone, my child was still so young that I had a relationship with Shelley, but a child that young, Shelley was good to her. Shelley took care of her. That was nice, but she wasn't really old enough to remember what was going on when she was sitting for her. She was very, very young.
Oh, okay, but that makes total sense. I know you were a journalist. So when did you join the Cleveland Press?
Okay, now I didn't hear what you said.
Oh yeah, so I know you were a journalist. So, and I think you joined the Cleveland Press. When was that?
Yeah, I worked at the Cleveland Press. I started there in 1958, and I was it was a positive experience mostly, but there were a couple of negatives which I will mention. First, the positive experience. The Press was an afternoon newspaper, and as you know, it no longer exists. The Plain Dealer was a morning newspaper, and the Plain Dealer was considered somehow more national, more serious, more national news. And the Cleveland Press had this reputation of being very close to the neighborhoods of Cleveland and the news in those neighborhoods. And that was a good thing. It was a wonderful experience for me because it was like getting an education about Cleveland. As I got assignments and talked to different people and got a chance to go to different parts of the city, I learned a lot, and that was a good thing. However, the press then, and it wasn't only the press, believe me, it was all of the newspapers in the country. Women and minorities were in very short supply. And of course, for me, the women thing was a problem, and I could see that most of us were pushed into an area that they referred to then, section of the paper called the women's pages. And the only women, when I started there, who were not in that part, were two women who were during World War II, when the men were drafted and the paper was really needing help. These two women had been given beats to cover that they never would have gotten to if there had been men around. For example, the one woman was in the business department. And after the war, she was strong enough and pushy enough that she managed to stay there. So those two women stuck it out, but it was difficult, and ultimately that is part of the reason that I left. I got somewhat disillusioned about the whole thing. And the other thing that I got disillusioned about was race, because one of the reasons that I wanted to go into journalism and thought that it was extremely worthwhile was because I believed the Thomas Jefferson line, which I'm going to quote but not get it exactly right, but you'll know what I mean, that if he had to do without government or do without a free press, he'd rather do without government. That how important is a free press was to society. Well, I thought that was great. And therefore, it was discouraging to find out that when I got there in 1958, they had a very large staff then, and there were only 2 black reporters. One of them was on the police beat, which seemed like a stereotypical place to stick a black reporter. The police beat office was actually not even in the press building. It was down in the district in the central, in the police station, an office inside the police station. And so it was a long time before I even met that black reporter. And incidentally, he lived in Ludlow, which I didn't even know, but eventually found out. The other black reporter got disillusioned by the way he could see blacks were being treated in journalism. And he was very religious, and he left the paper to go be a missionary. He went to I don't remember which foreign country, but I think he was assigned to a foreign country. And then the ultimate racial thing that I found very disillusioning is in crime stories, often what would happen is the reporter would be phoning in, and someone in the office would be writing the piece. And I was not in a general assignment situation where I wrote the pieces, but of course, I had peers and friends, guys who did, and I knew what happened. And what would happen if it was a black-on-black crime, the person who was calling the story in would tell the reporter who was going to write it up to put a C. And so inside the quote marks after the person's name, so like you'd put John Doe, and then you'd put, parentheses, and inside that you put C, when C stood for colored. Now, what did that do? What it told you is if it was a black-on-black crime, it wasn't newsworthy. If it was a white crime, especially if white on white, it was newsworthy. And if it was black on white, it was newsworthy. So if you put the little C in there, that would, lead you in the direction of what is newsworthy and what is not. Of course, that is incredibly racist. I don't know what year they stopped doing it, but I can tell you, I was quite disillusioned when I learned that. Having said all that, there were good people there at the Cleveland Press, good reporters, some who really were a little bit ahead of the times in trying to look at what was going on in neighborhoods in connection with race and all kinds of other things. And today, I still believe that a free press is absolutely necessary if we are going to solve our civil rights problems in this country.
Oh, okay. As somebody who looks at newspapers all the time, I've seen similar patterns from the past. Now, I was kind of curious. I know Ludlow did get a lot of national and local press recognition. So did you ever try to write anything about it while you worked for the Cleveland Press?
You worked on assignment. You didn't decide what you were going to write about. That's pretty much true today. Mm-hmm. Columnists, of course, important national columnists can decide what they want to write about. But reporters write about what the editor tells them to write about. And I was never assigned to write anything that would have had anything to do with race. I was not. I wrote, well, you've seen a couple things that I wrote. You saw the piece that you referenced early from the April 1977 Plain Dealer. Once I was freelancing, after a couple kids came along, and I freelanced for a while. I sold several pieces that had a racial component to them, but those were freelance pieces that would wind up on the op-ed pages. And but no, when I was a reporter, I didn't have any opportunity to cover issues related to race.
Oh, okay. No, that makes total sense. I'm kind of curious about when I read the magazine article about the straw.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I read the magazine article about straw buying, so I was kind of curious, how exactly did you and Ludlow Association come to learn about Ernest and Jackie Tinsley difficulties in finding a home?
I was active in the Ludlow Community Association from the time we moved in. As I told you, we were involved with the Ludlow housing program and helped us find our house. And I immediately volunteered to be an activist in the Community Association. I was on the board of the Community Association and even before that was involved as a volunteer in various things. Unfortunately, you ask me in your written questions, and you're not the only one who has asked me. Recently, when there's been all this more interest in doing the civil rights trail and everything, I've been asked about how did we get connected, specifically to the Tinsleys. And honestly, I don't remember who the person was. All I can tell you, it was almost certainly a board member, not necessarily the board president, but it could have been someone on the Ludlow board who was especially involved with housing stuff, specifically. And whoever, and as I say, I can't remember who it was, but whoever it was approached my husband and me and said, we have a Ludlow family that wants to move to, okay, so where was I? So they contacted us and said, it's absolutely legal for if you have the money to buy a house and the house is for sale, that you should be able to look at the house and make an offer to buy it. And they are doing this, and they kind of haven't found what they want in Ludlow exactly, and they want a somewhat larger house. And so they're looking in Shaker, but they are running into some serious difficulties. And here's a chance for Ludlow to do something that we can take a look at what's going on with the real estate thing. We can help this family, and then maybe we have to end up with doing a straw buy. And I actually knew what a straw buy was from when I had been, I told you I worked briefly with that nonprofit, and there was a family, there was a woman who had written a book, which I read when I worked there, and they had been straw buyers in Kentucky, and she had written about it and what it said about the real estate industry. So I knew what a straw buyer was. So I said, yes, but I have to talk to my husband. I talked to him. He said yes. And that's how it started. It was Ludlow that brought us together. I didn't know Ernie and Jackie, and Bert didn't know them. And so we came together at our house, and Byron Krantz, lawyer who lived in Ludlow, and also had been an activist with the Community Association. He had already told, I guess, who the board member, whoever was trying to put this together, that he would be happy to do a pro bono, that he would do the legal work both for the straw buyer to buy the house and the legal work for the straw buyer to sell the house to the Tinsleys. So he came to the meeting, and the meeting at our house was the Tinsleys, Byron as a lawyer, and my husband and me. And that night we talked about what would happen. And Ernie Tinsley worked for the Internal Revenue Service in Cleveland. He had a professional job. I think he was the first black in the office at the professional level that he was at. And Jackie was a school teacher in Shaker Heights. And Byron talked through with them. There was no question that the areas where they were thinking of looking for houses, they absolutely had both the down payment and the cash flow, the income to purchase such a house. And Ernie had very dark skin. I mean, Ernie, you would look at Ernie and you would say Ernie is black. Jackie could pass for white. Jackie, obviously, I'm sure, had some white ancestors back there. Jackie could pass for white. So, what we talked about was, first of all, to go through and make sure that, yes, they couldn't do this. The real estate industry active in Shaker Heights at that time was not going to give them a chance to move where they wanted to move. And examples of that is one point they went to look at a house, and all of a sudden the realtor, of course, had not seen them, and now the realtor sees that they're black, says, "Oh, I don't have the key. I don't have the key to the house. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to show the house." Another time, Jackie said she went, and I believe Ernie was with her too, yeah. And all of a sudden, they go to the place where they're outside the house where they're supposed to meet the realtor, and the realtor says, "Oh, the house just sold already," which of course was not true. So they were not even getting to look at the interiors of these houses. So what we came up with is that since Jackie could ask for white, is that I would shop for houses and Jackie would be my friend. I brought my friend Jackie with me. And this would give Jackie an opportunity to see the house. Jackie would not take notes. Jackie would not ask questions because she was not supposed to be the buyer. And I would ask questions and, make notes. And I had asked Jackie before we would go in, what do you want to know? And I'll ask that. And did you read the article that was in Shaker magazine about the straw buying?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Well, if you will remember, I think it is in the article that the one where we actually bought the house, she managed to get me in a different room. We were in a room, and then she kind of moved me quickly into another room and lowered her voice and asked me, she said, "Is she a Negro?" And I knew in that second, if I said yes, that I was not going to get the house because she was going to know that Jackie was the real buyer. And so I said no. And I thought of my mother, and they bring you up not to lie, but one of my absolute, I read it every year on Martin Luther King Day, letter from Birmingham jail, where Martin Luther King talks about when it is okay to lie, when you're furthering social justice, and you're saying the right thing is to do. So in my mind, the right thing to do was to. I could already tell that this was going to be the house that Jackie really wanted, and I was going to. If I didn't lie, there was no way she was going to get the house. So it worked out okay. Then I had to bring my husband, and we went through with and I had him ask questions that I had asked Jackie. I dealt with Jackie all the time, not Ernie, and I'll say something about that in a minute. But so then I would ask Jackie, what do you want to ask Berta? The kind of questions a man would ask. So I remember, Berta asked about the furnace. How old is the furnace? And, this sort of thing. So anyway, we went through the house again, and then we made an offer, and we bought the house. And if you read the article, you know that when the seller found out who the ultimate buyers were, he felt like he had done something terrible to his former neighbors, and he called up, and when I answered the phone, what I remember is I picked up the phone, and he started yelling so loud that for a minute I couldn't even tell what he was saying. It was just like this great roaring noise. And unfortunately, my mother, who lived in West Virginia, was visiting. What a time to have her visiting. And she and I had been sitting at the breakfast room table drinking tea or coffee, and she could hear this yelling into the phone. So the phone had a long cord. I moved out and sort of around the corner, so I was sort of out in the hallway. And he kept yelling. He said he was going to come over and kill Bert, my husband. And Bert actually was out of town on business when this happened. He wasn't even in town, although I certainly wasn't going to tell him that. And he just went on and on and on. And I just listened to him, and I don't even remember what I said in response. It doesn't matter, because he didn't want to hear my response anyway. I don't think I said much of anything. He just screamed and yelled, and then eventually he hung up. But he made it sound like he was going to do something to us. And, of course, I called Bert, who was out of town, right away, and told him. I lied again to my mother. She said, that person was yelling on the phone. What was that about? And I made up something to say to her. And I immediately called Jackie and told Jackie that they should be on the alert for a while. And we were, and nothing happened. He did not do anything else. And, if this were happening today, I think I would be more scared, because so many people have guns today, and there's so much gun violence. But back then, when he said he was going to come over and kill my husband, I didn't think, oh my gosh, I bet this guy has a gun and he is going to come over here. I might think that today, but I didn't think that back then. Or maybe I was just younger, and I just wasn't, I was more naive. I wasn't as scared as maybe I should have been. Now, about Ernie, I told you that Jackie got to see houses with me. She got to see the house they bought that, certainly Bert and I saw. There was no way that when Jackie found this house, there was no way that Ernie could see the inside of it. Because if he had gone with her, without her, whatever, he never would have gotten anyway. A realtor wasn't going to show him the inside of the house. So he bought a house that he did not see the inside of. And be. Sure it was. A very, very painful experience. I made some handwritten notes at the time, just about the actual buying meeting and stuff. And I wrote that Ernie was very quiet. He said almost nothing. In other words, he was very upset, and why wouldn't he be? And I never had the courage at the time to bring that up with Jackie. It was just too painful. We all moved on with our lives. I didn't talk about it in the neighborhood. I don't believe she did either. It isn't that we kept it a secret or anything. If anybody from the Ludlow Association would have wanted to talk to me more about it, I would have talked to them, and I'm sure Byron, the lawyer, would have too. We didn't keep it secret, but we didn't talk about it because it was a painful, painful thing for the Tinsleys. And many years went by, and in a conversation with the archivist at the library, that's how that magazine article came about. The subject of the straw buy came up, and she said, "Oh my," she said, "I think that should be something that we should really be part of history." So that's when they approached us about doing and approached the Tinsleys about doing the magazine article. So in all those intervening years, we didn't say anything about it, but it had to be very, very painful for Ernie. So then, in 2008, I finally had the courage to call Jackie and ask her to go to lunch with me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the experience that had happened. And she was retired at that point. Ernie, of course, died much too young. He died in 1972. She was retired, and she said, certainly, we could have lunch. So we went to Panera in Shaker Heights, and for about an hour and a half, we sat and we talked about it. We didn't just talk about the straw buy. We talked about Shaker Heights. We talked about our lives. We talked about retirement. And at the very end, when we were getting ready to part, I finally had the courage to ask her the question. I said, Ernie had to buy a house that he couldn't see the inside of. Can you tell me, did he really like the house? And I believe she was giving me a totally honest answer. She said, oh, he did. She said, he really liked it. She said, when we bought it, she said, of course, he couldn't see it. He said, if you want it, we're going to buy it. And she said he was a very special guy. And I wrote a note about that. I had her exact quote. She said he was a very special guy. And she proceeded to tell me some things that he had done, like they took a sunroom and converted it into an all-weather room, And he did a couple of projects in the house, and she said, yes, he did like it. But I can't even imagine, couldn't then and can't now, what the whole experience felt like to him. And when I think about Ludlow, and when I think about what has happened since then, and all of that, it makes me think that these experiences are. We have to understand this history. We can't bury it, and I think that's why this civil rights trail will be a good thing. The people that were parts of the civil rights trail, not just the Ludlow part, but all those other parts. Most of those people now are dead. era, everything that happened, we shouldn't let that history be lost. We can't solve our problems if we aren't honest about what they are.
I agree. I'm kind of curious with the straw buying. Is that something that also happened with other residents in Ludlow? Or
wait a minute, I can't hear you again.
Oh yeah, was straw buying pretty common in Ludlow, or is your example the only one you know of?
I never knew of any other one. The law then passed in 1968, the Fair Housing Law. And there were two things that happened in 1968. There was the national law, and the other one was there was a Supreme Court decision called Jones versus Mayer, you might look up. And in Jones versus Mayer referred back to a law that actually had passed in, I think, 1866. Which dealt with the issue of housing discrimination. And so you didn't need to do straw buys. What you needed to do then, in 1968 and going forward, was to sue, because now you really have a law that says when the real estate industry does what they're doing, it is absolutely provably illegal. And you can really go after it. And so that's what happened. And so everybody, Operation Equality was started, was directed first by Alan Gressel, Ludlow resident, and then by Joe Battle, Ludlow resident. I worked there. Several other Ludlow people worked there. There were other organizations that were started. Cleveland Heights became active in the thing. And so from 1968 going forward, the challenge became to do something about the systemic problem, which was the real estate industry. And fortunately, things have changed a lot. Yes, it is certainly possible now to go into an all-white community if you're a person of color and buy a house and actually have a realtor that will show you the house and you can buy the house. But it is also true that studies and things have been done to show that some discrimination still happens. Illegal discrimination still happens. In other words, the real estate industry, once the law was passed in 1968, didn't change overnight immediately and start doing everything right. That didn't happen. And again, it's a good reason to have this civil rights trail, to look at what we're on is a journey here, and a journey that we need to understand the history of, but that journey's not over.
I'm kind of curious. It's a question that came up because yesterday I interviewed Maxine Isaac, who is the daughter of Bernard Isaac, the second president of Ludlow.
I'm sorry, say that again. I couldn't hear that.
Oh no, I said I interviewed yesterday Maxine Isaac, who was the daughter of Bernard Isaac, the second president of Ludlow.
Oh yeah, Maxine, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, what was your relationship with the other members of Ludlow?
What was their relationship?
What was your memories of them? Because I know there's a lot of community gatherings and.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. I couldn't hear that. Try it again.
Oh yeah, what was your memories of them? Because I know the association had a lot of community gatherings.
What about a community gathering?
Oh yeah, what was your relationship with other Ludlow members like the Isaacs?
What was my relationship with others? Yes. Well, I think for example, Bernie and Mimi, Maxine's parents, were extremely active in Ludlow. Ludlow physically is not a very large community. The boundaries of Ludlow, it's not that big. And the relationships that were forged, the people who were very active were, like in most endeavors, it's a small group of people who are usually the most active. But there was a lot of awareness and a lot of back and forth and a lot of people knowing each other in the community and being involved. It just happened.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, I was kind of wondering, living in Ludlow, did you face like any questions
Yeah,
from?
I can't hear you again. Do you have the speaker on again?
Nope, I'm putting my face my face close to the phone now.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of wondering, living in Ludlow, did you face any questions from family or friends about living in an integrated neighborhood? Because it wasn't pretty common elsewhere.
Did I face any questions from the family? Well, most people, don't say what they're really thinking, but an older relative of my husband said to me, a year or two after we had moved into Ludlow, and, I'm sure she'd heard, negative things. Oh, there are blacks moving into that part of the community. She said to me, well, don't worry, Carolyn, you'll get enough money at some point that you could afford to move. And I said to her, we're not interested in moving. We love our house and we love our neighborhood and we're staying right here. But no, I didn't have any. Other than that, I can't think of any direct confrontation or concern or anything. My mother, after she retired, when she used to come and visit us for several weeks at a time, she forged a friendship with a couple of our black neighbors and really enjoyed these women. Enjoyed when she came to visit, sitting outside on our porch or, on the front steps with them talking and getting to know them. And, she was very positive about our neighborhood. So I think, we're really lucky in that regard.
Oh, okay, that's pretty interesting. Oh yeah, I noticed you were an active member of your community. So how did you manage to gain trust from so many people to pursue public offices and serve on various boards?
Well, I think that, again, I'll go back to saying that Ludlow is not only a small area, but Shaker Heights isn't even that big, and people got to know each other, and there were, of course, as time went on, it wasn't just Ludlow. There were other neighborhoods where there were people who were concerned about trying to make a community that was open and welcoming to all kinds of people. And, we got to know each other through community activism, through the PTA, those sorts of things. And that's how, how we built those relationships.
Oh, okay. Do you remember the various offices you held? I think you was on school board, if I'm correct.
What did you ask about the school board?
Oh yeah, I'll just say what various positions you held, because if I'm correct, I think you were on the school board once.
Yeah, I was on the school board, and I was asked to run for the school board. It wasn't my idea. I was asked to run, and Steve Milter, who was an outstanding community leader, not only in Shaker Heights, but actually nationally at one point, but certainly in here, head of the Cleveland Foundation and, a really, really strong leader, Steve Milter, and he died not that long ago, was black. He really talked to me about running for the school board because it became clear that we needed to close some schools that, and this was happening all over the country. We were past the baby boom generations, and people weren't having as many kids, and some of these schools were underutilized and very expensive to operate, and Shaker was certainly going to have to look at closing some schools, which of course ultimately we did. And so he talked to me, and several other people did too, and encouraged me, really asked me to run for the school board. So that's how I got involved in that. And again, it relates to Ludlow, because I knew when I ran for the school board that if we won, we ran as a slate. There are three of us, Charles Taylor and Isaac Schultz and me. If we won, that the expectation would be that we were going to push to close some schools, and I knew that Ludlow very likely could be one of the schools we closed, which it was. And this had to do not with race exactly, but it had to do with geography. It was on the edge of the community, and I knew that this could happen, but I also knew that it was the right thing to do, that we had to work out something that made sense racially for the movement of kids, but also financially, that we absolutely had to do something. We couldn't keep spending money on buildings that we didn't need. So that's how I got involved in the school board.
Okay, this is my last question. It's a question I always like asking everybody. Yeah, can you talk about your life after you moved away from Ludlow and retiring?
Well, I don't consider myself as having moved away from Ludlow.
Oh, okay.
You know, I'm at Shaker Square, and when we decided to move, the reason we decided to move was I wanted to get on one floor if possible. I was starting to having a knee problem, which eventually I did have knee surgery, and I wanted to get into like a one floor situation, and there wasn't really anything available in Ludlow, and so we started. But I wanted to stay as close to Ludlow as possible. So we're at Shaker Square, and of course, you know that if you walk to the end of Ludlow going west, you come to Shaker Square. The Shaker Square is right at the edge of Ludlow. So when we moved, I still go to the same library. I still go to the same grocery store, the same pharmacy. And when I walk, I'm not walking now in this cold weather, but I do walk outside for exercise a lot. You know, I still head back down and walk up and down the streets of Ludlow. So I'm not that far away, and I didn't want to be that far away.
Okay, I've been to Shaker Square twice so far. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that's all my questions.